Good day, Poop Shoot. I'm back with more stuff that I've been up to lately. And I've got about 6 items here. So, oh, the cat scratched me. I just noticed that. Our cat's been going berserk lately. I don't know if she's upset that we're home all the time. Actually, I think she loves it. But we had a good wrestling match on the bed while I was changing the sheets. But that's neither here nor there. I just noticed that as I was looking down there. Since I have space constraints on my phone, let's get right into it. First thing, we continued with more 80s movies. We got 3 in over this past week or whatever it's been. And the first one is one of the things I watched a ton as a kid, released in 1986, Howard the Duck. George Lucas had some sort of input in this movie. I know he didn't write the story, and it was based on a previously existing comic book, but he was involved somehow in the creating of this movie. And basically the story is on this planet somewhere in space where ducks are the dominant species, and they don't fly anymore. They've evolved. They have legs and arms, and it's a planet full of ducks going about life as humans do on Earth. But all of a sudden, this duck that comes home, and he's, after a hard day at work, he sits down in his chair, and then suddenly it's like there's an earthquake going on, but him and his chair are sucked into space and go on this wild journey and eventually land in a slum in Cleveland on Earth. Of course, he's like, what the hell? There's all these non-furry, weird-looking human things walking around, and of course, he's an alien, so he's going to get ridiculed and stuff, so he's doesn't know what to do, and the alley he lands in is right behind this kind of club where this band is playing, and it's an all-female band. And after the gig, Howard, who is the duck that got transferred to Earth, of course, helps the lead singer of this band, Beverly, fend off a couple of goons. And in doing so, at first they're going to go their separate ways, and she's amazed at this alien being, but she takes pity on him. It's a rainy night, he's got nowhere to go, he's alone in a world where he's the only kind of species he is, and so she takes him into her apartment, and their relationship is a bit rocky and tentative at first, of course, but then they really begin to start to like each other. And she, one of the girls in the band, is dating a lab assistant, I guess, at some sort of university or something, or a museum or something like that. And so she goes to see this guy Phil and takes Howard with her, and he's amazed at Howard, but he has no real answers. And so it's a bust. Howard's upset, and then they have a fight, so they kind of go their separate ways. But later on, Howard reconciles with Beverly and realizes how much of a dick he's been, and he even gets their crappy manager to fork over money for their gig and that sort of thing. And eventually Phil shows up and brings his boss along, this Dr. Jennings, who was played by Jeffrey Jones, who was the principal on Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So I love that guy. He's a great actor. And they informed Howard that the reason he was sucked from Duck World, or whatever it is, over to Earth was because they had some big, I don't know if it's a telescope or something, but they were sending some transmissions into deep space aimed at Alpha Centauri, I believe it was. But their aim was off or something, and it hit Duck World, and that's why Howard was transferred down to Earth. And the reason they know that is because when it happened, a single feather floated down in the lab where the machine is located, and they're like, what's this feather? And then when Phil told them about it and took a sample of Howard's feather, they matched them and said, oh, we brought you to Earth during this process that we were trying to send these communications or whatever. So then they're like, we could probably reverse this and send you back. Now, when they go to do this, something backfires, the machine's broken, and they realize they may have brought something else to Earth. They don't know what it is, but it is evil. It is malevolent, and it is inhabiting Dr. Jennings. So the rest of the movie is like them dealing with this new alien being, I forget what they're called, but when they show their true form at the end of the movie, there's these big freaky scorpion looking things, and they're massive. And so Howard basically has to work with his friends, Phil, and save Beverly and save the Earth, and put a stop to this alien menace, and in doing so eliminate any chance he has of getting home. So this movie was funny. It's super funny. The girl that plays Beverly is so hot in the movie. And of course, it's got that old-time guy in a suit kind of effect to Howard, which I really like. I like it when they do puppets and stuff like that with the old school movies. You can tell everything is, there's no real special effects up until the end when the monsters arrive. That's the only real like special effects, and it's just kind of, it's harkens back to older times when movies were, still evolving in their processes and stuff. And I don't know how the movie got rated. I'm sure some people hate it, but as a kid, I remember watching it over and over and over again, and I still like it to this day. It's a lot of fun. Next up, and this technically isn't an 80s movie because it was released in 1978, but I watched it in the 80s, and to me is an 80s movie. The movie is Halloween. We all know that this original Halloween movie sparked off many sequels and reboots and stuff like that. So the story is, in 1963, on Halloween night, a young 6-year-old named Michael Myers, for some reason, stabs his sister Judith to death. From that day forward, he's been in prison for 15 years. And one night when he is being transferred to appear in court, the psychiatrist that's been dealing with Michael and trying to get him to, open up on what happened and why he did it and stuff, this doctor, who is named Samuel Loomis, is on his way to this court hearing to say he should not be let out of prison. No way, no how. But as they arrive at the prison where Michael is located, they realize suddenly something's wrong, and he's engineered some sort of escape attempt during this process of getting him transferred. And he actually steals Samuel Loomis's car and makes back to his hometown of Haddonfield, Illinois. Now, in Haddonfield, it's the day before Halloween, and a young girl named Lori, whose father is a real estate agent, she's going to school one day, and her father asks, "Can you put this key under the mat at the old Myers house? We're having a showing." So Michael Myers is already back in Haddonfield. He sees Lori go up and put the key under the mat, and she becomes his next kind of target. So all day long, he's kind of stalking her. And she kind of is like, what the hell is going on? She tells her friends Annie and Linda, what is this all about? Who is this guy? And they're like, it's nothing. They just kind of brush it off, sort of thing. Or no, is Jamie Lee Curtis Linda and the other girl is Lori? Anyways, the main character is either Linda or Lori. I forget. I just watched it the other day. I already forget. So anyways, before I get off on another tangent here. So then the next day, Halloween night, Linda or Lori, the main character, whoever she is, Jamie Lee Curtis, is babysitting a kid that she always babysits, and her friend Annie is babysitting another child just across the street. And so they don't have any really big Halloween plans, but their other friend, of course, is going out with her boyfriend and whatnot. So Michael, over the course of the Halloween night, terrorizes these kids and murders a whole bunch of them, and it's up to Jamie Lee Curtis's character to kind of be the one who takes him down, and there's this big kind of ending sequence where he's chasing her through the house and all sorts of stuff. And then Samuel Loomis, who eventually gets to Haddonfield and informs the sheriff, who's Annie's father, that Michael is on his way back. They're kind of staking out for him as well. So in the end, it all kind of comes to a head in one of the houses where they think they have dispatched Michael Myers for good, but they are wrong. So it's one of the original horror movies, that kind of contributed to that kind of genre. It's so recognizable, and everybody knows who Michael Myers is, and Jamie Lee Curtis, everybody knows her from that movie. And strangely though, I haven't seen any of the sequels or the reboot, so I kind of want to see them now, and I know I've wanted to see them for years, but I've just never got around to it. So maybe with all the time we have in our hands now, it might be a good time to do so. So we'll see. Next up, oh baby, this was a fantastic movie from the late 80s, 1989 to be specific, and came from the mind of James Cameron, who we all know directed T2, Titanic, Avatar. There's one other really good one in there I'm forgetting. Anyways, so it's a underwater movie, and as a kid, I was amazed by it because I've always been obsessed with shipwrecks and underwater phenomenon and stuff like that. And so when this movie came out, I was just like, oh, I'm fully on board without even, having to see a trailer. And the movie is called The Abyss. The story of The Abyss is that there's this experimental underground drilling rig called Deep Core that a woman named Lindsay Brigman has designed, and her estranged husband Bud is the one who's the current foreman on it, and they're somewhere in the Atlantic drilling for oil. That's kind of its purpose. They work for a company called Benthic. And suddenly, though, they get wind from the military that one of their, the U.S. military, that one of their submarines was mysteriously downed just near the Cayman Islands, and they don't know exactly what the cause of it was. So they're sending in a team of SEALs, and they want the Deep Corps to move to that site and assist the SEAL team in accessing this sub and seeing what's going on. Because in the meantime, there's some Russian ships moving in to do the same thing. And of course, topside, there is a hurricane blowing up. So there's all these things coming together at once that's going to make this a real shit show. Bud is like, are you kidding me? But he has to go along with it because the bosses say so. And when the SEAL team comes down, Lindsay comes with them. And Bud's like, oh my God, I got the SEAL team and I got my bitchy ex-wife. Divorce hasn't gone through yet, but that's besides the point. So, things start off on the wrong foot, but they're still okay. As they start to investigate the sub, though, and they gain access to it, one of the guys from Bud's crew sees this weird, strange light, and he starts freaking out, and he goes comatose. In the meantime, Coffee, who is the head of the SEAL team, starts exhibiting symptoms of high pressure, some sort of syndrome, which makes them all paranoid and crazy. And so things start to deteriorate, and Coffee, who has ulterior orders to acquire one of the nuclear warheads from the sub, is working kind of behind the Bud's crew's back to do this without them knowing. And as things unfold, Lindsay is confronted by this mysterious light that so upset one of the other crew members, and she realizes we're not alone down here, and this thing ain't human. This thing ain't from Earth. So it's some sort of non-terrestrial organism that they're dealing with under the waters. And as the hurricane blows in, as Coffee starts to go paranoid and starts to make decisions that start hurting everybody, it all kind of coalesces into a big sequence of mistakes and events that almost send the rig plummeting down into the chasm below. And Coffee goes to send the nuke down to blow up these aliens, and so Bud has to go on a deep dive to retrieve it and make sure that doesn't happen. And as he does that, he gets introduced to this alien life, and they kind of describe to him why they're there and what they wish from the human race, and they send a real clear message to humanity that you're doing things all wrong, and we can wipe you out in an instant if we want to. So it's this real movie that is like, it's so suspenseful through the first half or more, because you don't really see the aliens and stuff. You do a little bit, but you can't really get a good glimpse at them. And so it's kind of, that suspense leading up to. And then when you finally do see the aliens, it's not like an alien onslaught like in most movies where the aliens are the danger, right? The aliens are actually friendly and want to help humanity, but they have to use kind of tricky means to do so. And so it's kind of a really different movie in a couple of senses in that. So I was, like I said, I love underwater stuff, and I love aliens too. So like this was just a meeting, and exploring the underwater wreck of the sub was amazing. Like the whole thing was just so many things that I love, packaged into one little, actually not a little movie. It's like 2.5 hours. So one big movie. So awesome. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend. Next up, finished a book called Star Wars: Queen's Shadow. This is written by a woman named E.K. Johnston, who wrote a book on Ahsoka Tano that I read last year or so, and I really enjoyed that. I love the Ahsoka character. I like to see some of the, I'm not a feminist per se. I just believe everybody should get equal treatment and stuff, and of course I love women. So I do enjoy a lot of the real cool female characters in the Star Wars universe, and Ahsoka is one of my favorites. Her whole link with Anakin and becoming such a cool little Jedi, and then having to face Anakin in the Rebels series, and her whole persona and way of doing things. I just really like Ahsoka. And of course, Padme is one of my other favorite female Star Wars characters. She's just unbelievable. And so, knowing that E.K. Johnston wrote this book, as well as after reading Ahsoka, like, I was fully on board for a couple of reasons. And there's not much action in this book. It takes place in the last couple days leading up to the Queen of Naboo being turned over to the next one after Padme's term is over. And so, like, her and her handmaidens and her guards are all at the lake house on Naboo, kind of enjoying this last hurrah together before they all go do whatever they're going to do for the rest of their lives, sort of thing. So once the votes are cast, the new queen is voted in, and they all start to break up and go their separate ways. And that's when the new queen, Rhaenyra, I guess how you say it, she requests an audience with Padme and is like, I want you to be the new senator for Naboo if you'd be willing to do that job. And Padme is like, oh, I hadn't really given much thought to what I actually wanted to do, but this sounds like it could be fun, I guess. So she agrees to do it, and she has to get a new set of guards installed for her new trip, and a new set of handmaidens. And this is no easy task, because they really become close and important, and they really have to do their job to perfection, or else it could risk all of their lives, right? So upon getting to Coruscant, it's not easy sailing. There's a number of issues that kind of prevent her from, realizing her potential. People in the Senate don't know what to make of her and don't really take her seriously, both because she's young, and second, because they don't trust her after the stunt of getting Chancellor Valorum fired during the Trade Federation standoff when she was a younger queen. And there's an attempt on her life as soon as she lands on Coruscant, and so there's all this stuff working against her where people don't really take her seriously, and so she's just kind of taking it easy at first. But then she gets in with a senator named Mina Bonteri, who they seem to have a lot in common at first, but mysteriously over time Mina kind of pulls away from her, and it's kind of suspicious. But then she eventually falls in with Bail Organa of Alderaan, and Mon Mothma, of course, who eventually headed the rebellion. And she's from Chandrila, I believe. And so it's tentative at first, but eventually these three find they all have a lot in common and a lot of ideals in common. So then they start working together to further their aims and start working on committees and stuff. And when Senate goes to recess, Bail Organa's wife, the Queen of Alderaan, invites Padme and her retinue to stop on Alderaan for a week before they go back to Naboo for the rest of their time off, and strengthens that bond even more. When they get back to Coruscant after the Senate recess is over, that's when Padme scores her first real win in the Senate. There's a planet called Bromlark, who there was a natural disaster, and their extensive aqueduct system, which is responsible for all their crops and their water supply and everything, is greatly destroyed. So they appeal to the Senate for aid, and of course the Trade Federation's representative, Lot Dodd, he interrupts the motion and speaks out against it, and when it comes to a vote, the motion of aid to Bromlark fails, of course. So then Padme's like, I'm doing this for two reasons. First, Bromlark deserves our aid, and second, I'm not letting the Trade Federation get away with any more shit, because obviously she has a vendetta against them. So then she works with a young senator named Clovis, who is trying to get with her in a way, I guess, and she doesn't really want to, so that there's a bit of tension in that relationship, as well as she works with Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, and they burn the midnight oil, and they come up with a motion, an agreement, a pact between a number of mid-rim worlds that will see them all kind of trade goods and services for the benefit of each other, that will also aid Bromlark in their current crisis. And it makes so much sense that when Padme gives this impassioned speech at the next Senate session, the motion passes with great by a landslide, and so that's her first real win as a senator. And And afterwards, though, she tempers her joy when she talks to Bale and Mon and stuff like that, and they realize that, wins aren't going to come this easy. I mean, they did a lot of work, but chances are you can do that same amount of work on your next one and you'll get shot down anyway. So, but it was a big deal for Padme and her kind of her first move as a senator, and will help see off the rest of her senatorial career until, well, we all know how her career ends, unfortunately. But there is going to be at least one more book. It's called Queen's Peril, I think, is the next one. So I don't know. Hopefully there'll be more. But there's many years leading up to the Clone Wars and then during the Clone Wars that this series could probably help fill out Padme's life on Coruscant, and then with Anakin eventually when he comes of age and stuff. So very cool book. Despite not a lot of action, it was a page turner. Like, it's so engrossing to see how her career, navigating the nonsense of politics and bureaucracy, right, goes, and how her relationship with Palpatine changed from when she was a queen on Naboo, a queen solely stuck on Naboo and kind of at arm's length, versus now she's at the Senate and can kind of do lots more stuff, and she's right in his face. You can tell that the Emperor was starting to turn, right? So a very cool book, and I can't wait to read the next one, although it's probably going to be a while before it's out in paperback, so you'll have to wait for my report on that. Last up, a couple of video games. This one is awesome. NHL Faceoff 98 for the PS1. I'd played the previous two installments of this game, NHL Faceoff 97 and the original NHL Faceoff, and released by Sony for the PS1. The first one was awesome. The original NHL Faceoff. It's kind of a the action goes side to side, and it's kind of a tilted overhead view, and it's like the original NHL Hockey's on the Sega Genesis, where you have your speed burst button, so you can just demolish people with hits. Like, the hits are so violent, but it's hard too, because you're taking that many strides at full speed. You miss guys just as easily as you sometimes hit them. So, but that's the main aspect of this game I like. It's the speed and the ease of gameplay. It's challenging. Most games are one goal games. They're intense. They're low scoring. It's like real NHL action, but kind of more arcadey, right? And I found on the original NHL Faceoff it was really good, and then in the 97 version they made a couple of introductions to features that kind of hurt it. They made people start to turn to skate backwards when they got going a certain direction, and that really made hitting hard at certain times when you're in the middle of that backwards transition. If you go to hit somebody, you're scooting off in a weird direction, and a couple of other minor things they changed that really didn't help the game. But in 98, they got back to that original gameplay style of the first edition of the game, as well as making a couple of improvements that actually worked. So this game is easily, I've played the first 3 games of this franchise now, and this one is easily the best. So much fun. There's only 4 game modes. There's Exhibition, which is just one-off games of against teams you're choosing. Practice, so you can just go out and hit the ice and practice your moves. Season, play a full NHL season with playoffs, or just playoffs, so you can just do the Stanley Cup tournament. So I, of course, played a full season with the Leafs and won the Stanley Cup against the Flyers. The playoffs were really cool. I swept the first 3 series, which surprised me because I lost a fair amount of games in this game. Like, it's like I said, it's always close, and you never get blown out, but you could lose a game by 1 goal just as easily as you could win it. So it's really neat. It keeps you honest. It keeps you into it. It keeps you interested. It's intense. But in the playoffs, I put it all together. I swept LA. I swept. Who was the other team? The second team, I don't remember who I played. Then I swept Detroit, which was crazy because they were rated like 20 points better than I was. And then Philadelphia I took out in 5 games, which I was still impressed with because they were ranked even higher than Detroit. So, they had Lindros and LeClaire back then, who are virtually impossible to hit in that game. And if you give them a breakaway, they score every time. So I won the cup on the game, and it was so much fun. I went through this game way faster than I go through any other NHL game right now. It's so fun. So there's a few more versions of it, I think. So that continue on the PS1 for a little while, and then go to the PS2. So I should be starting 99, I guess, in the near future. Last up, a PS3 game I've been looking at for a long time. Finally found it in the bargain bin at Giant Tiger a while back. And it is South Park, The Stick of Truth. The story behind this one is that there's this brief cutscene of ancient times where these armies are squabbling over the stick of truth, which will give its wielder ultimate power over the universe. So then after that cutscene, it forwards in time to South Park, where you're introduced into the game as this new kid that has just moved to South Park, and your parents are like, go out and make some friends. So you go out, you meet some kids, you meet Cartman, who is playing this role-playing game, real life. He's the human, a wizard that leads the human side with Kenny and a bunch of other kids, and they're fighting against the elves, who are led by Stan and Kyle, and they're squabbling over the stick of truth, which Cartman currently has in his possession. So then as you go along and you make more friends, this adventure between the two sides unravels, and you can't even explain the premise and the plot to this game, because it becomes so insane that you just have to play it for yourself. If you've been like on the fence about this game, just get it. It's so much fun, because I was for a long time too. I didn't want to pay full price or close to full price for it, because I didn't know what it was going to be like. But then, considering I got it as a bargain game and then played it and saw how good it was, I was like, this is one of the best values I've gotten in a long time. It is so much fun. It's one of those games where you don't want it. You're okay. I'll do one more task, and then same as when I was playing Smash Bros. One more fight, and then it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and you're like, oh god, I gotta go to bed, right? So, and there's all these different quests you have to perform, and then there's sub quests, and you can just kind of free roam South Park and do them at your leisure. But before you can move on to the next kind of story item, you have to complete that specific story part, the quest part of the story, right? So, and then there's all sorts of weapons and abilities and items you can get along the way, but it's not hard. It's not like you have to upgrade like in Fortnite and blueprints and schemes and whatever. It's all very intuitive. It's not very time intensive to equip stuff and use items and stuff like that, and it just makes the game a lot of fun, really easy to play. And of course, being South Park, the game is downright filthy. The language, the content, it's just filthy. I let my son watch a lot of movies that are, probably too old for him to watch, that are violent and whatever, and play games that might be a little over his head. But I do have certain limits, and he won't be playing this game for a long time. so just be warned about that. Yeah, so much fun. So glad I got it. And now there's the Fractured But Whole South Park game, which is now, I'm like, I'll have to wait until I see that one for cheap, and then I'll get that as well. So, but anyways, I'm probably well over my time limit right now, so that is all for now. But of course, I will be back in the very near future. So long.